There is a moment, a quiet moment, when the noise stops, when the phone is face down, when no one is calling your name, when the room is completely still. And for most people, that moment is terrifying. Not because the silence is dangerous, but because in the silence, they can finally hear themselves. And they are not ready for what they hear. We live in a world that is afraid of stillness, deeply, quietly afraid. People fill every second with noise, with content, with conversation, with distraction. They scroll without purpose. They play music they are not listening to. They keep the television on just to feel less alone. They chase plans and gatherings and social events, not always because they want to be there, but because the alternative is sitting with themselves. And sitting with themselves feels unbearable. Ask yourself honestly, when was the last time you sat in complete silence and allowed yourself to simply be? No phone, no music, no conversation, just you and your own mind. If that thought makes you uncomfortable, then you already understand exactly what I am speaking about. Because most people have never truly met themselves. They know their name, they know their preferences, they know what they like to eat and what they enjoy watching, but they do not know their patterns. They do not know their fears. They do not know the invisible weight they carry from experiences they have never processed. They do not know why they react the way they do, why they feel the way they feel, why the same problems seem to follow them from one chapter of life to the next. And the reason they do not know is because they have never been quiet long enough to find out. There is a deep truth that most people spend their entire lives avoiding, and that truth is this: solitude is not punishment. Solitude is a teacher, one of the most powerful teachers you will ever encounter. Not a teacher who gives you answers, but a teacher who asks you the questions that no one else will ask, the questions you have been running from. When the distractions disappear, truth appears. That is not poetry. That is simply how the mind works. When there is noise, the noise becomes your reality. You react to it, you respond to it, you are shaped by it. But when the noise is removed, something else rises to the surface. Something quieter, something older, something more honest. The parts of you that have been waiting patiently for you to pay attention. In solitude, you begin to notice things about yourself that you would never notice in a crowd. You notice how your mind moves, what it returns to when given no instructions, what thoughts arrive first in the morning before the world interrupts, what emotions linger beneath the surface that you have been too busy to feel. You notice your habits, the small ones, the ones that happen automatically. The ones that slowly define the direction of your life without you realizing it. You notice your fears, the real ones. Not the fears you admit in conversation, but the quiet fears that live underneath. The fear that you are not enough. The fear that you will be forgotten. The fear of failing in ways that no one else will witness. The fear of wasting your own life. Silence forces honesty. It does not negotiate. It does not comfort you with distraction. It simply sits with you and waits. And in that waiting, you are shown exactly who you are when no one is watching. When there is no performance. When there is no audience. When there is nothing to prove and no one to impress. And for many people, what they find in that silence is not what they expected. They find unfinished grief. Old wounds that never closed because they were never acknowledged. Patterns of thinking that were inherited from painful experiences. Beliefs about themselves that were never chosen consciously, but accepted quietly over years of hurt and disappointment. This is not comfortable. I will not pretend that it is. Meeting yourself honestly is one of the hardest things a human being can do, but it is also where growth begins. Because you cannot change what you refuse to see. You cannot heal what you never allow yourself to feel. You cannot build something stronger until you understand what is already broken. And solitude is where that understanding lives. Now consider what happens when a person learns to sit with themselves, when they stop running from the quiet and start learning from it, when they begin to use solitude not as an escape from the world, but as a return to themselves. Something shifts. Mental clarity begins to develop. Not the artificial clarity of a motivated moment or a quote you read and forgot by evening, but a deep, settled clarity. A quiet knowing of what matters and what does not, of what deserves your energy and what is simply noise pretending to be important. In solitude, the mind learns to separate signal from distraction. It learns to prioritize not based on what is urgent and loud, but based on what is genuine and aligned with who you are truly becoming. Discipline grows in silence. Not the kind of discipline that requires external accountability, not the kind that collapses the moment no one is watching, but the kind that is built from within. The kind that says, I am doing this because I have decided who I am becoming, and I will not betray that decision simply because no one is here to notice. That kind of discipline is rare, and it is built in the hours that no one sees. In the mornings before the world wakes. In the quiet evenings of consistent, unspectacular effort, emotional control deepens in solitude. Because when you are alone and honest with yourself, you begin to understand your own emotional patterns. You begin to see how certain thoughts trigger certain feelings, how certain feelings drive certain behaviors. And once you see that chain clearly, you can begin to interrupt it. You are no longer simply reacting to your inner world. You are beginning to understand it. And understanding is the beginning of mastery. Independence grows. Not the cold, isolated kind of independence that pushes people away, but the grounded kind. The kind that no longer requires constant validation to feel stable. When you learn to be comfortable alone, you stop needing approval to feel worthy. You stop performing for an audience that exists only in your anxiety. You stop making decisions based on how they will appear to others and start making them based on what is actually true for you. And that is one of the quietest forms of freedom that exists. There are two kinds of people, and the difference between them is often invisible to the outside world. The first person fills their life with noise. They move from one distraction to the next. They are always in motion, always connected, always occupied. They are not necessarily happy. But they are never still, and they are never still because stillness frightens them. Because in the stillness, the unprocessed parts of their life begin to speak, and they do not want to hear it. So they keep moving. They stay in the noise. They stay comfortable, and they stay exactly the same, year after year, wondering quietly why they feel somehow unfulfilled, somehow stuck, somehow like life is passing through their hands like water they cannot hold. The second person chooses differently, not always willingly. Sometimes they are forced into solitude by circumstance, by loss, by failure, by a season of life that strips away the people and distractions they relied on. But in that solitude, instead of collapsing into desperation or numbing themselves into avoidance, they listen. They sit with the discomfort. They allow the silence to teach them. And slowly, something begins to change. Not dramatically, not overnight, but steadily, quietly, the way real growth always happens. They begin to understand themselves. They begin to see their own patterns. They begin to feel the difference between what they were told to want and what they actually value. They begin to make different decisions, quieter decisions, decisions made with more intention and less noise. And over time, the people around them notice something different, a settled quality, a depth, a kind of calm that cannot be performed, only earned. That calm comes from one place, from time spent honestly alone. Solitude is not emptiness. I want you to understand that clearly. The emptiness you feel when you are alone is not the nature of solitude. It is the withdrawal. It is the discomfort of a mind that has been overstimulated, reaching for a stimulation that is no longer there. That discomfort passes, and what replaces it, if you are patient, if you are honest, if you are willing to remain in the quiet without reaching for an escape, is something remarkable. Clarity, purpose, a deepened sense of self, an inner stillness that does not depend on outer circumstances to remain. Some of the most significant transformations in human history happen not in crowded rooms or in the presence of admiring crowds. They happened in silence, in solitude, in long, unseen seasons of private struggle and private growth that no one applauded because no one was watching. The person who emerged from those seasons was different, stronger, more grounded, more clear. Not because they were exceptional, but because they were willing to remain in the quiet until the quiet revealed what they needed to know. You do not become more by constantly consuming more. You do not become wiser by constantly filling your mind with more noise. You do not heal by staying perpetually distracted. Growth requires space, and space is exactly what solitude provides. There is a version of you that has not yet emerged, not because you are lacking something, but because you have not yet given yourself the conditions that version needs to grow. Silence, stillness, honest reflection. Time spent without performance. Time spent returning to yourself instead of running from yourself. That version of you is patient. It is not waiting in frustration. It is simply waiting. Waiting for the noise to quiet enough that you can finally hear what has always been true about you. What you are capable of. What you are meant to build. Who you are when the world is not watching and you are simply, honestly, quietly yourself. Do not fear the quiet room. Do not fear the empty afternoon. Do not fear the season of life when the crowd thins and the silence thickens. That is not abandonment. That is an invitation. Solitude is calling you toward yourself. And when you go there, when you truly go there, without escape and without performance, you will understand something that cannot be taught in any classroom or explained in any conversation. You will understand that the most important relationship you will ever develop is the one you have with yourself in silence. And that understanding will change everything. Sit with the quiet. Let it teach you. It knows what you need to become. Comment. Silence teaches me.